Okay, and hello everybody, and welcome. My name's John, and I'm a director at Zero Carbon Yorkshire. I also work at Community Energy England. Just on share my screen. And yeah, welcome to this collaboration between two arms of Zero Carbon Yorkshire, the long-established buildings group, and the newly reformed Community Energy Forum. We felt that given our mutual interests and given the recent Green Homes grants and wider set of funding announced from government for a wide range of retrofit projects, we should explore what opportunities are available for community organisations interested in retrofit projects in their community. But first of all, I wanted to give some context and occasionally chuck some big numbers about. So the built environment, it accounts for roughly 50% of carbon emissions, and roughly 50% of raw materials globally go into building, maintaining, demolishing building stock. At the national level, in the past couple of weeks, the Climate Assembly concluded with a lot of support for government-backed retrofit and for gas boilers to be phased out by 2035. Recently, also the Green Building Council, LETI, and an increasing amount of local authorities are starting to prioritise retrofit. And through the ever-present lens of COVID, we are perhaps starting to see opportunities, particularly around the lack of energy efficiency skills. There is an ever-growing pool of people who are going to need new jobs. A recent UK 100 report said that we're going to need an army of 500,000 well-trained retrofit experts, from builders to plumbers to electricians. And I heard recently from an eminent that if we are to meet decarbonisation targets, we would need to retrofit 1.2 homes every minute. So this suggests that we're going to have a very, very busy next 10 years. But at the domestic level of retrofit, there are issues. There's issues with poor advice being given and poor quality installation, which are impacting homeowner confidence in going down the retrofit route. We need to be able to consider how to achieve results, but without grand designs budgets, but they still future-proof homes. We need to think about how we can promote and sell comfort over just financial returns. Not being cold next to a window, or the house still being warm when the heating isn't on, things that people don't know they want until they have them. I mean, I've just had to put my heating on for the first time this year, so this is very much ringing in my head. But all this whilst being very aware that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to this. So a huge barrier to energy efficiency and retrofit is the need for bespoke information for each project. So if we're to zoom out a little bit and we're to look at the 300 community energy organisations that we, Community Energy England, have surveyed in the past year. At the beginning of 2020, there were 234,000 community members actively engaged in or pursuing energy efficiency projects. In 2019, in England and Wales, there were 9,155 energy efficiency services provided by community energy organisations, and a whopping 3,649 homes were improved with a variety of methods. So there is a real groundswell of activity from community energy organisations, but it's often hard for them to figure out what a viable business model is. Energy efficiency and retrofit is almost seen as a benefit as opposed to a core business activity, although this is starting to increase, as we will start to hear from in this event. But there are barriers. VAT, for instance, for energy efficiency measures needs to change drastically. I mean, it's frankly insane that VAT is 20%. We're in the midst of a climate emergency. In Belgium, for instance, VAT on these activities is 6%. Building standards are nowhere near where they need to be. zero carbon or passive house standards needs to be an aspiration for new house builders. But instead, nationally, we see so many badly made and energy inefficient homes being built, often, ironically, or with a bad sense of humour, being built on floodplains. But I digress. We're starting to see institutional acknowledgement of retrofit projects. The biggest prize in architecture, the Sterling Prize, has gone to retrofit projects recently. A couple of years ago, the retrofitted castle, and last year it was a passive house social housing scheme. And I'm starting to hear about amazing technological advances. Only last week I heard about mycelium grown insulation that acts like Kingspan or Celotex. I find this very exciting, although I'm not particularly technologically knowledgeable in this area. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to some of the challenges that we're facing here. Enough of me rambling on. We've got a real array of speakers from across the country. Over 90 people have signed up from across the country. So I just want to say welcome to everybody. If you're here and you value the work that we are doing as Zero Carbon Yorkshire, if you find this event useful, perhaps consider joining. Membership is free, there's no strings attached. It'll help you to join a network of like-minded individuals who are really looking at how we can make Yorkshire and beyond zero carbon. So yeah, please do start to have a chat in the chat function, ask those questions, and we will be having Q&As throughout the event. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the convener of the Zero Carbon Group, Chailey Collis. She works at Green Building Storage. She's got a wealth of expertise on this subject. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy.
Hi, thanks, John. I'm going to be really brief because I know we've got a very tight schedule. So this is wonderful to work with John on this. Because John convenes the Zero Carbon Yorkshire Energy Group, and we're the Buildings Group, and just made sense to do this together. And the idea came about because I was getting loads of emails from different groups around Yorkshire, and I just thought we all need to share the knowledge and network with each other. And that's what the Zero Carbon Building Group does. I think that's one of its chief skills is sort of networking. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat box, and if you want to be on the Google group for that, please let me know. We've got another webinar coming up in about a month with a bit of a focus on passive house. So I'll just share that now, but I'm just going to hand over to Luke Richardson now, who is our chair for tonight, and he's got the tough job of keeping everyone to time. So thanks, Luke, over to you.
No worries, and thanks for that introduction. I decided not to interrupt John in his flow there, even though I went over time. I promised a bell. I didn't think I had one, and then I found my wife's Prosecco bell. So hopefully everyone can hear that. That's going to be your 2-minute warning. So if you hear that bell, you need to be wrapping up what you're presenting. First of all, as John said, make sure you become a member tonight if you're not already. You'll get our newsletter, keep up to date with everything that's going on. But without any further hesitation, it's Jonathan Atkinson from the Carbon Co-op. Are you ready to go, Jonathan?
Yeah, totally. So hopefully you should see my screen. Do you want me to stick to the original time, or shall I cut it down to claw back some time? Luke? I'll wait to hear your bell. All right then. So yeah, I'm Jonathan from the Carbon Co-op. Carbon Co-op, we're a community energy organisation based in Greater Manchester. Although I have to say that I myself am Yorkshire. I'm from Middlesbrough, which is technically in Yorkshire, although a lot of people don't know that. So yeah, Carbon Co-op, we're a community energy group. We've been doing stuff for, been constituted for nearly 10 years now. Next year will be 10th anniversary, but we've actually been active and doing stuff since the mid-2000s. We've got a long track record of work in retrofit. I'm going to explain a bit about what we're doing at the moment, our people-powered retrofit service, which is, we've got more than 50 people involved in that, all having retrofit to varying degrees of complexity and size. But kind of my themes for this evening, for my talk, are really going to be around professionalisation, about the journey we've taken from kind of voluntary and like just episodic kind of organisation to professional one. Social enterprise trading is a real focus for what we do. I'm going to really highlight the value in the service, and achieving that value basically as a way of trading, which is something that John mentioned in his link up. Taking a people-centered approach rather than thinking about buildings, it's just bricks and mortar, they've got people in them. Thinking about community-led approaches as a USP in and of themselves, not as kind of an add-on or a kind of, nice to have. And think about leveraging trust from householders as part of that USP, and about local solutions to local problems. So how do we build local markets for retrofit that operate at scale? Because that's what we're after really to make things work. This is a little kind of insight into some of our members, all different sorts of people. We have 250 plus members now paying £35 a year. So it's like a service-based cooperative. People join to achieve a service. They want to reduce their carbon emissions. Primarily, most of them want to retrofit their homes. They may have already done some retrofit and they want to share that expertise, or they might be joining to do that. And we've, in the past, been involved in all kinds of different ways. We have done training and advocacy and capacity building with our householders, but we've also got involved and procured large-scale retrofits work ourselves on behalf of the householders, acting as contractors. And that's involved a fair amount of risk, technical expertise, and some fairly large projects as well. We've kind of gathered a lot of that expertise and knowledge. Our approach is whole house. It's fabric first. It's using low impact materials in that, and thinking about things like wood fibre and what have you. If people are aware of it, the AECB, Association of Environment Conscious Builders, we're part of that network, and that's very much our approach to retrofit. We're also committed to things like open source, like sharing our tools and knowledge with others. There's a reference there to PAS 2035, which is a government process quality standard, which tries to outline the stages you would go through to achieve high quality retrofit. And the process and the service that we've developed fits within PAS 2035. I think that's quite an important thing. So having had that history, that membership, doing that work, we've recently, about a year ago now, launched People Powered Retrofit. This is a BAYES-backed project. They're backing the infrastructure and development of the project, not the delivery of it. So people involved, the households involved are paying for works, and we're offering a service to enable them to procure those works and to get on with things. We're not contractually involved in the sense of we're not sitting between householders and contractors, but we are contracted to the householders, offering services, at every stage, and I'll talk a bit more about that as we go. But yeah, this is some nice posters we have. I'm going to talk about the different ways in which community energy organisations can be involved and that we are involved. And I think part of it is around understanding the barriers to retrofit and understanding how community energy organisations and our interventions can help people overcome those. Because basically people want to retrofit their homes and we want to help them do that. And there's value to that. I'd say previous approaches, which I won't go into in much detail, they've been very top down. They've involved all these big tier one companies, billion capita. They've absolutely failed. They failed to deliver quality, and they failed to deliver what householders really want, which are bespoke services that retrofit their homes and make them more comfortable. And so why isn't retrofit happening? For us, it's too top down. It's too one size fits all. It treats properties as just objects without people in them. So it's not about delivering service for the household themselves. And there are many people out there who just think, well, we have to retrofit everything. People don't really get a say in that. They're just kind of benign recipients of that. We think very differently to that, and that's hopefully behind part of our success. Why do people commission their retrofit works? You might want to speculate. People put ideas in the chat if you're interested. Why do people want to retrofit their homes? Well, we've asked them many years here, and here's some examples. But actually, certainly the customers that are most eager to go, the people what you might call early adopters, reducing carbon emissions is actually one of, or the main motivator for them. It really is top of the list. Being warmer and more comfortable is also a part of that. And then money usually in our assessments usually comes third. And that's kind of overturns the conventional wisdom where people think, actually, it's got to be cost neutral, it's got to work, the pounds and pence, when's it going to pay back? You know, for us, we need to sort of throw some of that thinking out the door, really, because people don't procure high value services, improving their home, making their homes a better place to be on the basis that it'll be cost neutral, that they'll pay back over time. And I think this has been the reason why things like retrofit energy efficiency had a bit of a bad name over the years. Actually, people are after a better quality house. They want to do something around the environment. They want to improve their home for future generations. They want to put something back. So it's tantamount thinking about people that improve their homes in terms of, you know, a new loft conversion or investing in, you know, a better kitchen or what have you. It's about like a value added. And I did touch on it there. I think also too often in the past, people have looked broad brush, the Green Deal has to work for every single person in the country. Actually, people are very different. People have different motivations and can be broken down into different segments. One way of breaking them segments down is to people that are early adopters and innovators and are willing to do this kind of work first rather than the early and late majority. And too often people have tried to design services that work for kind of the middle of the road people that are actually hanging back for now, and they'll come on board later on. The people we need to target, the people who are interested and want to retrofit their homes, are in that early adopter segment, and there are a particular type of people we need to be thinking about how we engage with those, really. And it's the pioneers. These are the pioneers. Those are the early adopters. And for me, that's another advantage of community energy groups. Our members, the people we engage with, the people that we work with, are those early adopters. They are a little bit of a window into the future because they are the people who are willing to have a heat pump, to take that, you know, maybe none of their neighbours have a heat pump, but they're willing to go for it. And so we need to be thinking about that because these are the people who are eager to go, really. They're eager to do it. Okay, I'll take you through just some of the things that we've done in terms of the People Powered Retrofit service and building that. And we started with personas and mapping, and this is about understanding the territory, understanding who the people are, what they're motivated by, and what kind of properties they live in and all that sort of thing. And we did a whole host of mapping as part of this, which was using existing open data sets and some research that we did as well into kind of what sort of people are out there and what they wanted. And this gave us a really great insight. This map is of Greater Manchester, so it's a city region of about 2.5 million people, 1.2 million homes. So it's a huge area, and quite often policymakers would be like, well, you know, do something for everyone. Actually, it's for us is about targeting the areas that people actually want to do stuff and trying to understand where they are. And this is using different data sets, different information to do that, rather than try and, you know, do it everywhere. I think there's some really interesting research here. One thing I want to share is it's quite often people think, oh, it's just small amounts of money. People only want to commit a few £100s or a few £1,000s. Our research, and this is primarily through the early adopters, shows the amounts of money that people want to commit are much higher, around 30 to 40,000 on average. And actually, as we've run the service, the people and the budgets have been actually higher than that, quite routinely above 50,000, and we've got people that are working with £200,000 budgets. You know, it's a lot of money, big work, but there's also value there that people are willing to pay for our services if we can help them retrofit their homes. And these are kind of some of the personas that we've identified, and I think it's important to understand that people are different. They have different motivations within this as well. And we're trying to target our different services to these different people. Community-based social marketing. Now, this is something that's a bit of a jargon phrase, but I think it's something that comes naturally to community energy groups. It's about building trust with people and communicating them effectively from the bottom up to recruit them into these services. Social marketing has been common within health, trying to engage people into kind of new lifestyle changes, behavioural changes that aren't necessarily the normal, so to speak. But in America, this has been used by municipalities to engage people in retrofit. And for us, it's a very effective way of working. Again, you can typify it to the alternatives, which are very top-down, leaflets and posters and all this sort of thing. Green Deal was everywhere. You know, it was in every newspaper, but it crashed and burned. It wasn't an effective marketing. It didn't speak to people and it didn't speak to their motivations. Community-based social marketing is very much from the bottom up. It's about innovative behaviours and new norms. It's about coming from the bottom up, as I say. And for us, it's about peers, trusted institutions, and it's about values and speaking to people's values. And that is, again, community energy groups, perfect for talking to people, trusted in the community. It's a bit of an example of a community social marketing campaign we did in Levenshulme. So there's all sorts of different ways in, you know, t-shirts, events, places in the community, engaging in different ways, some printed materials, some web-based, some webinars, lots of different ways, but you're coming at it in different ways, and it creates a lot of buy-in, a lot of interest. So you might have people interested, you might know, find the profile and find them, but we also know supply chain skills have been a real barrier to achieving retrofit. Again, until slightly confusing diagram. I think this diagram is to show that there are lots of different kind of stakeholders and people involved in the supply chain. It's not just the kind of go to one person and there you go. Part of our challenge is to simplify this for the householder, I think. But too often in the past, especially government looked on, you know, one large construction organisation as a place to do all this stuff. Actually, there's a lot more to it. And our approach, and one that's been shared by others, is to work with the existing supply chain that's already doing work in people's homes. So this is the RMI, refurbishment, maintenance and improvement sector. So there's people that are doing loft conversions already, and not necessarily to high energy efficiency standards, but they're doing work, they might be doing extensions, they might be doing all this sort of thing. For us, it's about engaging those supply chains. Those supply chains tend to be local. So it means that we can, as community energy organisations, better interact with them, better procure them and get them on board. Our training programme and the way we've engaged them in this service has been very practical based. It's not been sending people into classrooms. It's about doing work on site in people's homes. It's about peer learning as well, ensuring that people are kind of sharing expertise and knowledge. And for us as well, there is a sales job the other way to show to contractors and supply chain that we can give them good clients. Is that your bell? Yes. Okay. Okay, I'll be quick then. Okay, so supply chain, engaging them. There's a big thing there. Designing services and effective services that work for people as well. We went through quite a process here, engaging people in the design of people-powered retrofit. Contractors, clients, all sorts of people to test them out. This is the workflow that's involved, and it's an end-to-end service. It goes from advice, so people come to us just interested in retrofit, don't know what to do really, and we take them through this whole process. And we have different people at each stage. So we have advice, we have an assessment tool that we go through, an assessment service, we send an assessor out. We then go through design stage using retrofit coordinators. Procurement then, we're assisting people to procure into our supply chain that we've developed there and trained up. We have on-site support in the form of retrofit coordinators, and we have a handover and evaluation stage at the end. And we have this ecosystem that sits around it in terms of architectural support, networks and frameworks as well. The point I want to emphasize here is there is value at each stage. So we're charging at each stage, we charge out on a day rate basis, and we're generating income. If people are spending £50,000, there's value to be taken at each stage. And there are job roles here, the professionalisation that I talked about before, advisors, coordinators. We have a staff team, but we also have freelancers that we bring on board as well. And I think that's really important in trying to achieve that capacity whilst not kind of going too far too fast. My last slide is about unity of strength, okay? And I think we've got another webinar you'll be pleased to hear coming up in a few weeks, which is around replication and federation. And for me, these kind of common services that we can develop in-house within community energy that can help us achieve value, I think we need to be sharing them through these different mechanisms like licensing, like social franchise, like all sorts of things. So we can be utilising similar practices and similar tools all over the country rather than kind of inventing our own things everywhere. If you're interested in the webinar, there'll be a link at the end. So just to summarise my lessons, just kind of what you've heard already. One size does not fit all. It's very bespoke. It's very particular to every area. We can build trust from the start. We need to remain really client focused and what the householders and members want. Mapping and research is a real prerequisite to getting out there. We need to understand what our communities are like before we start kind of trying to get things out there. Testing and piloting and starting small is a real success kind of factor. Can't just try and dump something on people. Got to see what works first. Being iterative and being flexible. Building in technical expertise is so important. We've had that through architects and surveyors. We've had them on the staff team. And I think that's really important if we're going to grow as a sector. We need to build our expertise within our organisations. Getting training as soon as possible, being collaborative. And I put one quick link in at the end, and that's to the Green Homes grants. We've done a briefing document there and a webinar. If people are interested, have a look. But yeah, that's me done.
Thank you very much,
Jonathan.
Time. We're just a couple of minutes over. That's no problem at all. Just to kind of segue on your kind of green homes question. There's a question in the chat around how do you think this fits with the green homes initiatives going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of it's both a positive and a negative, the Green Homes grants. It's too much money too quickly. They're throwing it at this 2 billion to the sector, and there isn't the contractors there. So the it's become more. There's also then creates impetus for certain contractors to throw up work and just try and charge through people. So there's worries there as well. There's a limited role for intermediaries like ourselves. Potentially, there's a growing role there though, as a handholder for the householder. But it is good that money investment's going in there, as long as the government are thinking long term, and we're lobbying on that basis.
Okay, another one. So, can you advise how the community organisations can upskill quickly, whilst avoiding the potential of giving potentially bad information?
I mean, yeah, it is really important that people are bringing on that technical expertise. I can't emphasise enough the collaboration we've had with Urbed, who are a team of architects in Manchester. If you have skill and expertise in your area, you need to engage them really quickly through networks like the AECB and what have you. It is tough, but it's hard, but it's something that needs to be done. The other thing is these replicable models that I've talked about, the open source things, like we're replicating our assessment methodology, for example. So there are some shortcuts out there, but really you can't beat well-trained professional kind of people as part of this kind of mix, really.
Just a reminder to everybody, if you do have any questions for Jonathan, put them in the chat. I'll read them out to him and he'll answer them. Any we don't get through in the next 5 minutes, we'll be taking later on. It's 7:20, if you're still with us. So there's a question around improvements to home and comfort before payback and financial returns. How do you kind of balance that? What's your advice there?
I mean, we do the advice stage and the assessment stage with everyone. So we filter them, basically. It's a half-hour interview with every householder before they come into the service. So we get to understand their motivations, really. And if someone is very focused on money, they've got a limited amount of money and they only want a payback, then that necessarily dictates how we work with them and the signposting we do for them. But I have to say is we're very clear on the people that we work with and who we want to work with. And we've got so much demand that we can afford to be picky for now and say, if you're only after small measures and limited things, well, you can come back later, you know.
Mm-hmm. A final one before we move on, but I'll pick up any that people leave in the chat later. How has social marketing, so the workshops and events that have been hosted on Zoom and Teams, etc., how they've been working during lockdown? Has that worked well for you?
Absolutely gone mental. We did it as a bit of an emergency measure. We were like, let's throw our training program online. We used to do physical events to 20, 30 people. I think that was great. We're now doing webinars, 200 people. And the thing, people are just really interested in technical knowledge and expertise, but from a householder perspective, because there's a real dearth of that out there. What we do is we do first 50 tickets are free and the rest are pay what you want with a minimum of £1. And it's a real great income generator for us. And there's just huge amounts of demand. So yeah, webinars like this and others are fantastic.
Fantastic. No, that's really good, Jonathan. Good to hear from you. Hope everyone else enjoyed that as much as I did. As a Greendale assessor myself, I can speak from experience. There wasn't a lot of work out there for Greendale assessors, but please correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. Right, on next is Tim Lunall from Cozy Homes, Oxfordshire. John, I think you need to stop sharing your screen and then Tim can share his. Let's give you a moment to sort that out.
How are we doing? Is hopefully
I can see you. Excellent.
Can you see the?
Yes, we can see your screen now. Brilliant.
Perfect, brilliant. It's actually fantastic to go straight on from Jonathan, actually, because we're another pilot that's through this BAIS program, and there's a whole range of different approaches. But actually, I'd say almost probably the similarity in ethos between sort of Carbon Co-op and Cozy Homes Oxfordshire is probably very similar. So it'll be interesting. I'll pick out some different aspects of it, and I'll be interested. I'll try and actually see if I can do it within the time. So there's just one or two questions to see if there are any contrasts. But I'll see how we go with that. So I'm going to whiz through. So the first bit is, I'm going to whiz through. If it will let me. There we go. The partnership is actually Low Carbon Hub, which is where I'm from, which is based in Oxford, and it's very much sort of community-based organisations. They've done a lot around generation in particular, so people might have come across big projects like Hydro, Sanford Hydro, those kind of projects. This is a particular push now on the other side of it, of the kind of powering down the energy efficiency side, both on domestic side, but also on SMEs and business side as well. It's a partnership between ourselves, National Energy Foundation, who does a lot of the calls, and then a key element of it is Retrofit Works that does the kind of the management of the delivery. So those are the kind of, in one sense, the formal pilots that are funded through BAIS, but community, as Jonathan mentioned, is absolutely the heart of it, and the advocates is particularly the community advocates that actually take the message out there. And those all really work together into, I'm getting some feedback there. Are people hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yep, perfect. And then it's very much a partnership with the householders and the practitioners. So that's the kind of gives you a feel for some of the different moving parts. Now, given that we work through the community advocates, the carbon emissions and carbon saving absolutely is part of the messaging. And similar to Jonathan, we are finding a lot of people being motivated by that. But we also want to make sure, and interesting enough, that interesting to hear Jonathan talk about the early adopters. We're hoping to also move into the early majority as well as the early adopters. And some of this messaging around comfort that Jonathan mentioned about, and in fact, John, you mentioned that at the start, we feel is key. So that the sort of both the messaging and the visuals around sort of it being, yes, about carbon saving, absolutely front and center, but for those that have different motivations, whether it's comfort, whether it's health, whether it's the financial side, that we try and make sure we have the messaging around that. And to also have a very sort of, we try and make it easy to picture, have visuals like these. On our website, you'll see there's quite a lot of videos, which I won't show here, but if you go to Cozy Homes Oxfordshire, you'll see quite a lot of videos and things. And this got a schematic diagram just to show the process that you go through as a householder. Those type of things seem to help, so that when people see the things on the information on the website, by the time they get in contact with us, they already have a bit of an idea of the journey that they're going to go through.
Sorry, I messed up with the bell there, Tim. You do have another 5 minutes left.
Okay, I didn't hear the bell. You'll have to give me a wave because I didn't hear any bell at this end. So
I'll give you a shout. You got 5 minutes. Don't worry.
So the underpinning it though is very much the science behind it. So the messaging we try and make very clear so people can see that, but actually it is very much based on the science behind it, understanding the building physics. And very much like Jonathan mentioned, we actually really emphasize that every home is unique. Here's a slide where I'll click now. You'll see that these are the different, this is one street of homes that Retrofit worked at, and each of those is a kind of an energy chart for a home. The diameter of the pie gives the amount of energy used, and the different colors looking at really give you the amount where the energy is spent, whether it's on, whether it's hot water, windows, whether it's going through the floor or the ceilings. It really does show just how you have to treat every home as being unique. And that's why they kind of, we go through that process where we've got a whole house plan, which I'll come to later, so that we try and make the messaging at the start, drawing people in. But once we've drawn people into the process, we do emphasize that it has to be based on the building physics and every home being unique. Fabric first, absolutely. And again, you'll hear some of the things that similarities with Jonathan. It is actually making sure that the first part is also making sure that we minimize the heat loss and maximize the air tightness. And then it's actually looking at kind of responsive building services. And then as part of that final part of it is then how do you make sure the generation, the renewables, to make sure it's the overall energy performance. But you start with getting the building physics right, because then you can size the low carbon technologies for the generation properly at the end. This is the whole house plan that I mentioned, sort of a report that goes to an individual, that's very much individual home based. What you'll get within that whole house plan is different phases. We also know that some people want to do the whole thing in one, but people will actually quite often want to approach it in phases. And again, that's part of the conversation we have with people right at the start in commission whole house plan, and then they can choose what they want to do within those different phases. Once we've established that, you then have a mix of the individual measures that make up that whole house plan, with some initial estimates around what the costings might be. Assuming then the householder wants to progress, then those are developed into quotes. As Cosy Homes Oxfordshire, we'll go out to contractors and coordinate the quote process, help the householder to choose, but as with Jonathan, the contract on this part of it is directly with the suppliers. So we provided that hand-holding, that independent service. And what that then means is that you can be the reference point for the householder. You haven't got skin in the game in terms of what's charged. So we can make sure we provide that independent view. Just whizzing through then, last few slides, just give you a feel for how the referrals have gone over time. You'll see actually, August you might think of as being a quiet month. We actually had a pretty strong month. That September figure was right at the start of September. We've now had a record month of 40, and so that's 40 referrals, 40 new people coming into the service. We've got about 370 customers in total. And the Green Homes Grant has definitely had a role within that. Happy to answer any questions around that, but I echo what Jonathan was saying. It'd be great where we can help our householders make most of the Green Homes Grant, but we're clear that we will layer on that whole house approach. If someone comes to us with a Green Homes Grant and just says, I just want to do internal wall insulation, I don't want your report, I'm not interested in building physics, we'll point them elsewhere, because if you're altering the sort of building physics, the fabric of the building, you need to go through that process to understand what you're doing to the home overall. You saw some of the blips. COVID definitely had an effect there. We've now got really extensive health and safety processes to give comfort for people when we go into their homes. And the other part, we've now got virtual assessments, virtual surveys, where we ask people to provide some basic information. I can send that through to anyone that wants to know more about that. It's a first start. We wouldn't go to actually doing work on site without having a retrofit coordinator going on site and producing a whole house plan. But for those that might, just want to find out more generally, and don't know whether they want to commit to the full process, or particularly those that might feel they're vulnerable at the moment within the COVID environment, then that's available as a starting point. I think last slide, just to give you a feel. We have got the contractors there. It's important that once we've got people that are there ready to go, the contractors have to be there to move things forward. So that's a list of the kind of whole range of different measures and the contractors behind it. Appreciate that was a bit of a gallop through. Those plan builder is something that we're doing actually remotely to allow people to build their own version of the whole house plan online, which has just started, just to kind of empower people doing a sort of free service and getting things going as well. That is my final slide.
Fantastic.
Bit of a gallop through, sorry about that, but any questions, very happy to take them.
No worries. And there's a couple I think that are pertinent to the whole group, and there's a couple in the chat you might want to have a look at. But the two I wanted to highlight were, what's your geographical spread? Do you come out of Oxfordshire, for example?
We do. I mean, we come out. The Oxfordshire is our focus. We go around the edges of Oxfordshire as long as we. What's important within that is that we can provide the contractors to go wider. So we go to Gloucestershire, we go into Berkshire, we go into Buckinghamshire. The retrofit coordinators go more widely. So we probably wouldn't come up to Yorkshire just in terms of kind of the supply chain, but we'd love to work with you guys. I know there's plans to use some of these approaches, and in the same kind of way as Jonathan talked about, the learnings and approaches absolutely want to replicate.
And the last one, one from one of our fellow directors, which standards were you referring to earlier? Which standards are you working to? Building regs?
So PAS 2035, the whole house approach is at the core of it. All our renewables people are also MCS certified to make sure that's there. I mean, I would say that it's because we work with Retrofit Works, and there's a really thorough onboarding process to bring on contractors. I would say it's definitely Trustmark Plus. I mean, Trustmark's a registration scheme. There's not really always, that kind of rigorous approach to the contractors really understanding the PAS 2035 process. We absolutely make sure that's part of it. So that high quality and that approach where we can make sure that all of our contractors have bought into that whole house approach is absolutely core to what we do.
Fantastic. We're out of time, but I'm going to rob 5 minutes from the questions at the end to bring on Tom Dissimon from York Community Energy now. Are you ready, Tom? Thank you, Tim.
I am, yeah. 2 seconds.
So I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know what you're saying.
Can you see that okay?
We can, Tom. Brilliant.
Lovely. Yes. So, yes, I am Tom from York Community Energy. And some of you may remember me from a year and a bit ago. Myself and my colleague Johnny came to this meetup and did a presentation on our Warmer Homes York project. This is kind of an update on that, really. Yeah, so you may remember last time we talked about basically York Community Energy is all about generating renewable energy, community owned. And then we kind of expanded slightly and extended our reach and started looking at saving energy as well in the form of insulation. And so we kind of proposed this idea called Warmer Homes York, where we would, so what we were doing last time was shadowing Andy Walker from Short Insulation as he went around doing his assessments. He does whole house assessments. And basically sort of learning from him how to kind of be assessors, really. And the other thing that we were doing as well is we did a housewarming party. So this is where you do sort of get a bunch of volunteers together to go around to someone's house and do some DIY insulation, again under Andy Walker's watchful gaze. Yeah, so in this case, we insulated underneath the suspended timber floor, put some mineral wool under there. And I think it's fair to say that when we were here last time, I think the response was very sort of enthusiastic, but also there was a bit of concern for us from a legal perspective. How qualified are we to be assessors kind of thing, and a bit worried about if we start giving out advice without much experience and qualifications and thing. And obviously that sort of gave us a bit of pause for thought. We did a bit of introspection, So we've kind of been thinking about, playing to our strengths and what can we do to help sort of kickstart a market for retrofit in York. So here's a few things we've been doing since then. We've got a new section on our website, Warmer Homes York section, and it's got various things on there. So for example, there's a guide about how different kinds of insulation measures that you can make in your own house, and it's kind of graded according to your level of ambition. So there's, it starts basic stuff like draft proofing, and it goes, all the way through DIY insulation to home retrofit, at which point we basically say, like, you need to get a whole house assessment. In addition to that, we've invested in a thermal imaging camera, and we've been going around people's houses in the colder months of the year and finding cold spots in people's houses. That's been really fun, really interesting, and it's been a really well-received service. People are always very impressed with the results, and there's always something unique in each house. This was an interesting one where someone had a loft conversion done, and they just hadn't put any insulation back afterwards, which is kind of amazing, really. So there's always something interesting. And we did a draft proofing workshop just before the lockdown, in fact, which again was really well received. It was a really good experience. We've done another one since online, and we're going to be doing another one later in the year. And we've been doing quite a few sort of webinars and things, actually. So another thing we did for Community Energy Fortnight, we did an event about sort of building back better from the pandemic, with how can we basically sort of invest in green technology, and a lot of it was about retrofit. You'll be surprised to hear. And more recently, I think last week, in fact, we did an event about the Green Homes Grant and how you can benefit from that and what to look out for and stuff like that. So as for the future, we'd love to do some more thermal imaging surveys this year with our camera, and more housewarming parties. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to happen. It just kind of depends on the restrictions with coronavirus and whether we can work around that and stick within the guidelines. And then other stuff. So we're still advising people about Green Homes Grant, and we've got blog posts and things about it, really just trying to make sure that people are well informed and they understand how they can make it work for them, and not get ripped off or get a rubbish job or whatever. And then ultimately, this is kind of, we still want to kind of be part of the retrofit revolution in York, and what we're looking at now is a similar system to what we've already heard about with Carbon Co-op and with Cozy Homes Oxfordshire, where you have this kind of end-to-end service where we're kind of hand-holding intermediaries, and sort of getting people in to do assessments and things like that. So we're at very early stages with that at the moment, but yeah, we are looking to do something, and we might be talking to Carbon Co-op about replicating some of their stuff, but it's, like I say, it's all very early stages at the moment. So there you go. That was just a very quick blast through. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom. And apologies to Andy. The chair's scythe came down. I'm going to put him after Matthew. He's coming on in just a minute. I'm sure Matthew's prepped and ready to go. I think there's only one question for Tom, or a comment actually from Phil Bixby around the fact you can get a FLIR camera to plug into your smartphone now for about £300. Could you stop sharing, Tom, so Matthew can jump on and get ready? Thank you. So, see if there's any more questions while we have a moment. Lara's asking, is there anyone who's dealing with fuel poverty today? I think it's not explicitly linked, but if the next speakers can have a think about how that fits, and we'll try and mop that up with the questions later on. Over to you, Matthew.
Great, thank you very much then, Luke. As a lot of people, well, in Holmfirth, there's a problem with affordability of housing. And also there's not enough eco houses being built. Most of the developers are building large 5-bedroom houses, and they're just to building regs, and that's it. I'm an engineer, I'm a builder. I'm a director of Eco Homes and Zero Carbon Yorkshire. And what Eco Homes is trying to do is to build affordable, low costs houses for renting, which will also be near to passive house. So that is Eco Homes. So in the bottom right, you can see it's Eco Homes, and you can see we're a community land trust. So a community land trust is a legal organisation which is a little bit like a co-op. And as I say, the target is to produce affordable, low energy housing. So, right. Oh, it works. Great. The Eco Homes was started in November last year. The CLT, as I say, is a bit like a co-op, and it's owned and run by the community. So there are 9 of us on the management board. There are 56 members, or there were at the end of August. And again, if anyone here would like to join, you'll be part of building a bunch of eco houses. To be part of it costs you £1, and you are then a member. We also had issues. We're saying it's a community organisation. How did we do community involvement during COVID? And again, it was Zoom. We've had 12 Zoom sessions so far. Because we're trying to build houses for older people, we had one session focusing on what older people wanted in a property, one on what younger people wanted, one on the outside environment, and all sorts of bits and pieces. And we have a design specification. That's not published yet, but it will be eventually. There's quite a lot if people are interested on the website. So ecohomes.org.uk is the website, and then a couple of email addresses there as well. So the design principles, this is sort of like a generic scheme that we've got. So some bits of it, we had lots of discussions about how many cars should people have, and because Holmfirth is not, it's basically a rural community, so we've got 1 car parking space per unit, but they'd have electric car charging points. We're looking at developing short terraces of houses which are south facing. So obviously getting the orientation correct is important. Having small terraces gives you a decent form factor towards passive house and that sort of thing. Obviously cycle storage, things like covered meeting areas. There's other community housing near us, like Anstey Court, that we're copying bits from. They have some covered meeting areas to encourage people to form the community and so on. As also play areas. So because we're trying to have it for young families as well as the elderly, although you might, within one terrace, you might have some young families, some elder. Maybe the older people might be on the meeting areas and the youngsters in the play, but who can say? We've also got some allotments, wildlife areas, communal green areas, and we're trying to make sure that we include that sort of thing as well. The actual house layout, this is a picture of the sort of thing that we're likely to do. We actually nicked it. This is just a copy from Plymouth Community Homes, which was one of the largest passive house developments completed last year. So it's all the sort of things that one would expect in terms of U values, MVHR, air tightness. But then because we're looking at lifetime homes, making sure that the stairs are suitable for stair lifts to be fitted later on, trying to make sure we've got some home working space. One of the difficulties we have, I think most people have, is just what does it look like? Does it look just like another Yorkshire house so that it fits in totally? How eco does it look? So that'll be an interesting area. So that's what we're trying to do. The progress, now we're looking at some shortlisted sites. There's a couple of sites which are looking quite hopeful. We're wanting to do detailed design. There's an architect on the board, but we're also looking to work with other architects who've got experience of building eco houses. So if anyone around here or anyone knows of somebody who's done some eco terraces, brilliant, please contact us. Consider joining the CLT, and either send an email to info@, or that's my email address on the bottom. So that's what.
Thank you, Matthew. Excellent presentation there. So we're going back to Andy Boyle now, who I cut earlier, but he's now got his 5 minutes of fame to come. There wasn't a lot of questions in the chat there for you, Matthew, but there was a lot of talk about cheese. If you have a look in the chat, that's an organisation in Bristol, I think it was, who we might want to borrow work from. So if anyone's got any contacts there, it'd be nice to work out what they're doing and bring it to Yorkshire. Over to you, Andy.
Right, so I presented a couple of months ago, actually, so apologies to those who saw that, because there's inevitably a bit of overlap, but we're 2 months on with the project. So Otley 2030 is a community group developing a zero carbon and sustainability plan for our town, working with our town council and Leeds City Council, both of whom have declared climate emergencies and committed to net zero by 2030. So Otley Energy is the social enterprise that's attached to that project, really exploring what the role of local energy systems and community ownership in that, and currently really focused in on the role of retrofit in terms of reducing demand the way that we know that we need to. And I think importantly for us, we set our stall out right at the beginning, recognising the challenges within community energy and resource. So we've set our stall out to work with others effectively and stand on the shoulders of giants. We are working, and this is what I explained last time, we're working all the way up to UK Green Buildings Council, who have their Accelerate the Cities project, which is looking at developing citywide strategies. And we're working with Leeds City Council on what a citywide retrofit strategy would look like. And I'll talk about the role of a one-stop shop, a citywide one-stop shop in that. But really it's about getting down, as Jonathan was talking about earlier, it's really about getting down into the community. Ultimately, this is about retrofitting homes and this focus on whole house plans. So it's as part of a citywide strategy, it's very much about pulling a coalition together, recognising that this is bigger than any one organisation, bigger than the City Council, bigger than Leeds Climate Commission. And Jonathan was talking earlier about the barriers that the work of UK GBC is really focused on, all of those barriers that exist that need to be tackled in one go, around community engagement, but also supply chain. And a lot really for me around the funding gap, the lack of compelling funding models that exist. So really following and working with the Green Finance Institute on that. And we're getting on with a one-stop shop. This is what we're working on currently. We're working with Leeds City Council and Retrofit Works, who are behind the Cosy Homes Oxfordshire scheme. And I think that the slight difference between, or not the slight difference actually, the big difference, both Carbon Co-op and Cosy Homes Oxfordshire have been in receipt of BEIS grant money as part of trying to understand and develop these models, but we don't see that that's a sustainable model. We don't see that that we can be holding out for further government grants. So we're getting on and developing a community share raise to fund the equivalent of the Cosy Homes Oxford model in Leeds. But still very much driven by the advocates, the community level organisations. Otley Energy will be one of those, having gone through the process of setting this up across the city, and working with Leeds City Council, who are keen to support and see how they can be involved in developing it. And I think really fundamentally, I noticed Cheese mentioned in the chat, working with Jonathan and the incredible work that they're doing on community-based social marketing. This is very much about all of the organisations nationally, I think, getting together and sharing best practice. Alongside the one-stop shop approach, one of the areas that we're exploring with Leeds City Council have got successful examples of going into whole neighbourhoods and then encouraging all homeowners across all tenures to conduct some form of retrofit. Heavily funded in the examples that exist, but we're really keen on that partnership model of going into a community like Otley alongside the City Council, alongside the housing associations, and together understanding what needs to happen for those particular housing types and exploring opportunities through community networks to look at, whilst respecting that idea that all houses are individual, looking for opportunities for group buying arrangements and looking for how we can unpick those different types of funding models for different people in different circumstances like fuel poverty. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and bang on time. Excellent. We're going to reconvene at 7:10 for Ellen Robinson's presentation, but we've got 10 minutes of, 8 minutes now of discussion and questions. I'll start off with a question for Matthew and a question from Phil Bixby around fitting in. Do you want to replicate what's already there, or do you want to update it?
Is this for me? Sorry.
Yeah, it's to Matthew.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Andy.
The honest answer is we don't know. We've got, some of the directors say, well, it's got to fit in, and it does want to fit in, but then it also wants to look different. If you look at some of the existing passive houses that have been built, quite a lot of them actually look exactly the same as any other developer's house. We would quite like there to be visual distinctiveness, but it also wants to fit in. So it's an interesting balance, and we're going to be having some good conversations with architects to help us along with that, I think.
Okay, I think the next question, I'll get Andy back on now. There's quite a lot of kind of comments around upskilling the workforce. What's your view on that, Andy? How that's going to work going forward?
I think it's the biggest challenge, really. I think we researched pretty much all of the schemes going on around the UK, and that they all find that a similar challenge. It's exactly the challenge that the Green Homes Grant is going to find. People who are looking for even just Trustmark registered people in Otley, there aren't any currently registered, and I think it's a big part of that neighbourhood-based approach for me, is that you've got existing work going on with the likes of the city councils and the housing associations, and I think we've got to build from there, that there is a supply chain, but there isn't really a mature, if any, SME supply chain, and we've got to be getting on with what we can and trying to drive the market, which in itself will drive the supply chain, hopefully.
And there's a question from Chaley for you, Andy, again, around how will the share offer work, and is that to pay for the actual works themselves?
The share offer is to pay ultimately the costs of running the scheme up to a point that it becomes self-financing. And because the retrofit works model is similar to the carbon quarter model, is to be self-financing ultimately, but you've got to reach a critical mass.
I see. A couple of questions for Tim now. Thanks for that, Andy. Are you using the SAP methodology to do your assessments, or do you have a custom tool? This is from our question guru, Phil, again.
Yeah. So it's based on this Retrofit Works software called Chrome, which is underpinned by SAP. So that's the basis behind it. One of the things that we therefore have is sort of standard occupancy in the kind of that gets the base model. What we do spend a lot of time though with the retrofit coordinator is really to understand how people use their home, which comes back to what Jonathan was saying. So there's a standard methodology that's underneath it that provides that kind of baseline, but we absolutely personalize that in the report itself as to which measures are then picked out. But yeah, just to kind of get that standard comparisons, we do use SAP is underpins Chrome. But yeah.
It's also going back to your pie chart slide, if you remember it. Obviously, your point was that all houses are different. Does the heat loss calculation include controlled ventilation? This is a question from Adam.
So yes, when it gets that detailed next stage, so for example, if someone wants to then do work where they are looking at changing the fabric of the building, putting an air source heat pump, then you have the specific heat loss calculation that's done as the next stage. It's not part of the standard whole house plan, but before we move into any of the specific work done with people, that ventilation element, understanding that building physics in detail is absolutely essential. So there's a certain amount you can do at that base whole house plan level. That the fee that's paid for that is £175 for that base whole house plan, £75 for the virtual. You can do quite a lot with that, but when it comes to then doing the detailed assessments, then there's you just need to get someone in to do those calculations on top of that.
Makes sense. And the last one, I think, of this batch, I think there's a little bit of time if you want to drop another couple of questions in the chat. Anybody who's got a burning question. So Andy again, how do you find working with Leeds City Council in particular? I'm interested to hear this answer, as I've worked with Leeds myself. I used to be a council officer at Wakefield and York Council, so tread carefully.
No, well, to be honest, I'm sort of the biggest fan, really. I think the lack of resource in local authorities who have taken it upon themselves to drive the climate emergency is just astonishing. The lack of resource that they face is probably the biggest challenge that the climate emergency faces. So they're doing as much as they can with the resource that they have, and they need more resource. And I think it's up to community energy to try and fill the gap that the government is leaving currently.
So James, thank you for that. Sorry, James has asked another interesting question. I think Matthew is probably the best person to answer this one. How do you think a tenant could encourage a landlord to engage in a community retrofit programme? Maybe preaching to the choir with you, Matthew, but if you could pick that one up. Just ask you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if they happen to be in Homefirth, then obviously they can talk to Eco Homes and they're pushing at an open door. But I think also, if people just talk and say to their landlords that they are interested, it'll be good. And in the same as if you're going through the private rented sector, talk to the estate agents and say you're interested in an energy efficient home. Every house has an EPC, but almost everybody ignores them.
I think Tim's wanting to come in now and had...
Sorry, I didn't mean to drive. Yeah, just to echo that, I mean, certainly in Cozy Homes Oxfordshire on our website, we specifically do encourage tenants to also get in touch. We've had tenants that have got in touch with their landlord and then they've had the whole house plan done and are thinking about the follow-up work. And the wider private rented sector, that certainly is somewhere where we are actively trying to get interest at the moment. And the Green Homes grant should work. I mean, I've been surprised that we've not had more interest from the wider private renters, the landlords themselves, but we are getting interest from the tenants. And I echo Matthew's point: get people to get in contact. And if you talk and you kind of you'd actually in the interest of both the landlord and the tenant to improve the building long term.
Excellent. I think the last one, I'm going to go back to our kind of host today for John Hall. He's just answered the question in the chat, but I think it'd be nice for everyone to hear around Jenny's question with higher education and further education and how we might deal with that in terms of getting people upskilled.
Well, yes, very good question. I certainly don't have the answers, but as I stated in the chat, a couple of years ago, we were working with a couple of education providers to look at how we could create an apprenticeship standard for community energy. Very much seeing it as a vital way of helping to professionalise and upskill a new generation of people involved with community energy. We distinctly work with a cohort who have got life experience and wisdom on their side, and we're very actively trying to bring in some fresh blood. And we thought that this would do that, but yeah, to not much avail. I'm really pleased to see this funding that Adam Happer's just shared in the chat, and I'm really going to be delving into this in the next few days and see if this is something that we can help to promote with some of the sort of educational providers that we do have links with. This training is just so vital going forwards.
Excellent, thanks, John. So we're into the kind of second part of our meeting now, I guess. So it's Ellen Robinson, isn't it? He's speaking next. Sorry, I've written down on my board and it's a bit scrawly. So Ellen, are you there to ready to share?
Yeah, it's Rowbottom actually.
Okay.
Right, so I think that's the one.
Excellent. So it's community retrofit campaigns, and the kind of subheading I've got here is calling for local authority retrofit schemes. So hearing those comments about Leeds earlier, probably quite fitting towards this half of the session.
Yep. So can everyone see that okay and hear okay?
We can see it.
Right. So as a campaign, we're bringing a slightly different perspective on here. I've heard about some fantastic practical projects, and I guess so we're widening the lens out a bit here. Why a trade union campaign? Traditionally, workers have been pretty suspicious of industrial transitions, such as we're talking about with the transition to energy efficiency and renewable energy. It's in the past, it's usually meant job losses. Better paid, secure and densely unionised jobs have often been in carbon intensive industries. That's particularly in these times of high unemployment that people cling on. Looking to the bottom of that slide, obviously, the value of the wage is at its lowest point in 300 years. We've got rising poverty, destitution, in fact. Struggles over immediate survival are really making a lot of people feel that climate campaigns are the privileged, the middle class, the out of touch. So what's the solution to those potential conflicts? Well, here's the Campaign Against Climate Change trade union group, which has created this booklet about how we can create 1 million climate jobs. It's out of date now, but it's being updated, and that's the general gist of the campaign. I won't go into this one in great detail, but it's this slide details several job scenarios that have been put forward by organisations like the Institute for Public Policy Research, the Parity Project, the New Economics Foundation. They all look at it slightly differently, but essentially they're all talking about the very large number of jobs that could be created by an intensive attempt to get most of the UK homes retrofitted to. I mean, they're not highly ambitious standards. That they're talking about what would happen if we set out to bring all UK homes up to an energy performance certificate level C. Now, Leeds City Council's ambition is for A/B. So these are conservative estimates of how many jobs potentially could be created. Okay. Workers are human beings. We need decent homes. We need an end to fuel poverty, as has been mentioned. We need a livable future for everybody. Trade unions historically tend to have a sectoral approach to saving jobs, which means, let's cling on to the extractive industry as the gas and so on. But that's not going to achieve, what the future that we need for all of us. Workers want work that has social value. We want to say in how we work and what we produce. Also, looking outwards to the climate campaign, the Extinction Rebellion, the youth climate strikes, the direct activist movements, all of these movements, I feel are weakened by the absence of a workers' perspective. What happens is they become limited to protest, XR with their tell the truth, but but then what? Unrealistic expectations on policymakers to go ahead and enact solutions, but without taking it upon themselves to say, these are the solutions. So yeah, I think we need alliances between all the different sections of the climate movement to get more productive movement on that.
I can see you've got a few slides left there, Ellen.
Just how many minutes?
I can see you've got a few slides left. You've got about 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, can't hear the bell. But, okay, so so 2 things we want to do: campaigning within the union movement for the adoption of mass retrofit demand as national policy and as a movement campaign. The unions do have a large membership and they do have leverage with government, but that depends upon campaigning through the movement to get the correct policies being pushed at leadership level. The other side of our campaign is for a local programme of mass retrofit coordinated by Leeds City Council that can be a model for similar campaigns across the country. Our model motion, I think this is important, calls for local trade councils, trade unions, local authorities, training establishments, community organisations and retrofitting practitioners to work together, and as a first step, the convening of a meeting between all of the above. And I mention that specifically because in almost all of the commentary that I've read, there's agreement about the need for a coalition between all these different stakeholders. But the one that's always conspicuously missing is actually the workers. So the workers as central stakeholders. And that's why our model motion also includes ensuring that, just going down to the bottom, that a skilled workforce is available and proper apprenticeships provided using the facilities of the local building college, and that the local authority seriously considers creating an in-house workforce with fully negotiated terms and conditions of employment. And where that can't happen, that there need to be we need to be ensuring that all commissioned work is to standards of work, pay and conditions that are agreed with unions. So the local authorities have an enormous an essential role to play here. They're essential to instigate the projects, the larger scale projects that can focus on the fuel poor households, that can stimulate the supply chains, that can provide apprenticeship opportunities and work opportunities, because without that, training providers are not going to put on the courses that we need to get this skilled workforce. However, as we all know, well, probably people realise, the COVID crisis has so far cost Leeds City Council nearly £200 million, and it's going to get, obviously that's going to get larger. You know, we're nowhere near out of the woods on that, and things are going to get worse before they get better. So we have to look at the overlap as well between this and other campaigns that that involve the trade union movement. One of them is a campaign to help local authorities by demanding that the government writes off existing debt to the public works loan boards, and that includes debt which is really bogus debt to when the housing revenue accounts were decentralised, which has led. Okay,
I'm going to have to stop you there,
you
Ellen.
can see the last bit there. I don't need to.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. We'll be coming back for some questions after Jeff's presentation, Ellen. If you could stop sharing so Jeff can bring his presentation up. Really interesting, and certainly putting the workers at the front of any kind of strategies is something that needs to be discussed. Jeff, are you ready with your presentation from the Sheffield Retrofit campaign?
Yeah.
Excellent.
But John, could you share it with me? It's not. I'm struggling to make this happen.
Yep. 1 second.
Ellen, while you've got a minute, there's quite a few questions in the chat for you,
Right.
and quite a lot of support for what you're doing. The top question: have the union or the unions approached Climate Rebellion, Extinction Rebellion, for the climate campaign or other climate campaign organisations?
Now, I think that's a risk. Several of us have actually attended Extinction Rebellion meetings, and probably it was at the end of last year or the beginning of this year, we actually put it to them that, Extinction Rebellion works on the basis of a variety of working groups. So we thought setting up a trade union liaison working group would be a very good idea. A couple of people were interested in that, but basically it's very, I think there's work to do to actually integrate trade union activism into this, because it's quite an alien perspective to a lot of people who are involved in direct action movements. And I know Extinction Rebellion is an extremely eclectic movement, much as the leadership wouldn't want you to think so. There are a lot of people who are veterans of other things like Transition Towns, Climate Camp, all the rest, as well as the younger people who are trying to reinvent the wheel, but the trade union and the workers' perspective really needs to be in there. And I think that I think they're moving in that direction, because Extinction Rebellion has very much opened its eyes to the fact that it needs to be forming alliances with other kinds of social justice campaigns, anti-poverty campaigns, anti-racist campaigns, that sort of thing. So I think that the door's opening.
Excellent. I think Jeff might be ready now. Bit of feedback there. I think Jeff might be ready now. Any other questions for Ellen? We can pick up after Jeff's presentation. Excellent. Go ahead, Jeff. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name's Jeff Cox. I'm here with a couple of other people from the South Yorkshire campaign, Vanessa and Jenny. It's a very short presentation to save some time. Basically, we just wanted to make people aware that a new South Yorkshire refit group is forming. Basically, we're here to learn. There's 3 slides going to come up, and there's contact details on the second slide if you want to get your pens and papers ready. So can we go back to the first slide? So the retrofitting group is drawn from Sheffield Climate Alliance, Green New Deal UK, and Sheffield Labour for a Green New Deal. So I think, just to repeat some of the things that Ellen was talking about, this is a political campaign aiming to get public funding for community-led, community-scale retrofitting work. So it's not about individual homeowners and Green New Deal grants or Green Home grants. Our focus is looking at Sheffield City region. Now there's a complicated bit. The Sheffield City region, for most people, would represent South Yorkshire. It's not Sheffield, it's Sheffield, Rotherham, Barnsley, Doncaster, Sheffield City region. So the government funding comes into South Yorkshire through Sheffield City region, through the Mayor, Dan Jarvis. And basically we're looking aggressively for COVID recovery monies to kickstart the economy, whether it's retraining, whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's building supply products, but to have the economic kickstart from post-recovery, post-COVID, bounded on a retrofitting programme. And as I said earlier, the focus is on community level rather than individual homes. Go to the next slide, John, please. Shaping the market, building the scale was a phrase that was used by James Brass a couple of months ago to describe what the West Yorkshire Combined Authority are doing, and basically we're trying to do exactly the same thing. So that says it all, I think. Our weakness at the moment is we've started off from being a Sheffield-based group with predominantly Sheffield people in it, and we need to grow our geographic spread to South Yorkshire. So that's the stage we're at the moment. Then we've got a contact via Vanessa if people wanted to contact us. And then the third slide, please. This is Boris as our recruitment sergeant. You can read that for yourself. But what I would like to see that is on banners, placards, T-shirts, baseball caps, and push it back in his face that if he wants to say these flippant things in UN circles, he needs to provide the money to deliver it. And if he provides the money, then we'll happily help us spend it. So that was the presentation. Thank you very much. You're on mute, Luke.
I thought this would happen at some point tonight, and here it is. We've had a few questions through, and I guess the one I want to start off with is around the organisation of subcontracting. I think it's maybe a question for the previous speaker, but I just wonder if you got a view on that, because clearly, if you're contracting some work and all your subcontractors aren't within your kind of direct control, how do you start to kind of organise that labour and make sure they're getting all the benefits of any kind of government funding? I think it might be one for Ellen.
Yeah, well, I was going to, if I'd had a bit more time, I would probably have mentioned the city building, Glasgow city building, which actually is, I mean, it's not something that we could replicate very quickly because it's been many years in the making, but it is it's an operation that combines essentially training, social house building, retrofitting, maintenance. So what happens is that everybody who works within that organisation, almost everybody is unionised. They've got almost 100% union density, and they do probably the majority of the work themselves. But where they subcontract or commission other work, the conditions are, is expected that that the subcontractors also employ workers that are unionised and that work to the same standards of pay and conditions. And this includes not just not just pay, but also things like equal opportunities, you know, for women, for people of colour, that kind of thing. Yeah, but that's what we'd be that's the ideal that we'd be aiming for.
One for Jeff. The COVID-19 recovery money, where do you think this will kind of come from? It's a personal question, this one. You've mentioned it in your presentation. Who are you going to be lobbying for that kind of money, and where do you think it should come from?
Well, Rishi Sunak, Rishi is the short answer to that. I mean, with the end of the furlough scheme, there's an anticipation that there will be, you know, 1 million more unemployed people. You know, the government has to politically, the government has to respond to that. And if you can put forward attractive schemes to use that money constructively and generate tax revenues from it, then it becomes a circular money flow. So in our area, for example, Ed Miliband, who's the Labour spokesperson on climate change, is a Doncaster MP. So we've got political leverage from people like him. Dan Jarvis, our mayor, is a member of Parliament as well. So he's got access to the Commons tea rooms. So I think, you know, the idea is to put political pressure. So that's articulate bids, but it's also you know, potentially bodies on the streets and, you know, letters in newspapers and things like that to put political pressure on government to spend their money on their lagging.
Excellent. I've been in touch with the Sheffield City region recently around their strategy for recovery and also their energy strategy. Obviously now it's in the same organisation with these. The energy strategy is usually part of the industrial strategy. How do you feel that's going to kind of pan out in the next couple of years in this COVID recovery?
There's a danger that I'm going to hog the too much time there. So can I just sidestep that slightly and say that the Sheffield Climate Alliance is the umbrella body for all climate campaign groups in Sheffield. So we put a written reply in to the strategic economic plan, which is the first document that you've made reference to there. And then we put in a supplementary one specifically on retrofitting. So we've nailed our colours very much to the mast, that we see that as being a practical intervention that can be done, that can, going back to what Laura said earlier, it addresses fuel you can decide where to start and address fuel poverty in the way that you spend that money. And it can, instead of the climate emergency being a thing that stops people doing things, this spending on this bit of climate emergency can be a way of actually improving people's living standards, fuel poverty, ill health, all that kind of stuff. So this is a climate emergency delivering good stuff for ordinary people rather than restricting, a few pleasures for ordinary people.
And a final question for Ellen from Anna. Has this been looked at on a national level?
Well, which part of it?
I'll have to ask Anna for clarification, but I'm assuming from a comment, just the nub of your presentation, trying to engage with the workers to deliver change in the field of energy.
Yeah, well, it has, yes. Very quick answer, there's a little bit of a division within the trade union movement, because some of the most powerful, obviously, gas workers are some of the most powerful workers traditionally, and they want to hold on to workers who are employed basically in the extractivist industries. Are very worried about losing their jobs, as I said at the beginning of the presentation. And so there's a tendency for them to adopt more of a sectoral approach, whereas unions such as, for example, PCS, which is the Public Service Workers Union, branches of Unite, which work with people who are actually unemployed, unions like that are very much about taking, if you like, a whole class approach, that's all workers, which is all of us basically. The campaign against climate change trade union group has been pushing this, going around holding meetings. I spoke at a meeting in Islington the other week, and somebody else spoke at one in forgotten where it was now, but yeah, with we're also hoping to, as the campaign against climate change trade union group nationally, hoping to take part in a coalition of organisations that are building towards the COP26 summit, and organising our own alternative summit soon, which will have workshops on these things. And there's also been fringe events at the TUC conference as well, run by the what we call the CAC2 national organisation.
I think I'm going to give a final, once Ellen's muted me, a last call for membership. If you haven't signed up already to Zero Carbon, please do go to our website. You can sign up there and become a member. I'm going to hand you back to John, who's our host, and if he's got time to take any more questions, I'll leave that up to him.
Thank you very much, Luke, and well, thank you everyone for joining us, particularly the speakers who have imparted such wisdom, and well, thank you to everyone who also chipped in financially to support this event. That really helps our very small grassroots volunteer-led organisation, so thank you. I mean, my take home from this event is very much the need to upskill in a whole range of retrofit skills, and how to get the suitable accreditation for that. It seems so incredibly important, and seems like one of the biggest hurdles we're facing nationally. I think we'll wrap it up here, because I think it's important that we keep these events to time. Just know that we will share the presentations from the speakers and the chat, and a link to the YouTube recording in due course. So yeah, please do feel free to share those. And a reminder that Bradford Community Energy have got a share offer open at the moment. That is for a ground source heat pump and solar panels on 2 community centres in Bradford. So really worth looking into. And just going to echo what Luke says about joining Zero Carbon Yorkshire. It's free to join, no strings attached. We'll be doing more of these events in the future. Do feel free to get in touch with the organisation or myself. If there's any ways that we can help to facilitate partnership opportunities, that's one of the purposes of these events, is to really foster a true network of practitioners in the region and beyond. So yeah, let's wrap this up. I'd like to keep these events succinct so they are sustainable. So yeah, peace, solidarity, energy efficiency, and tons of renewables. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Well done.